Donald Trump. A name that's become synonymous with controversy, spectacle, and seismic shifts in American politics. You know him. Real estate mogul, reality TV star, and most importantly for our story, President of the United States. But Trump is more than just a headline or a punchline. He's a man who thrives on disruption, who relishes shaking up the status quo, and who brought his signature bravado from the boardroom straight into the Oval Office. His America First approach wasn't just a catchy campaign slogan. It was a mission statement that upended decades of global economic policy. Trump's vision was simple. Put American workers and industries above all else, no matter the diplomatic fallout. Trump's trade philosophy? Every deal needs a winner and a loser. And he was determined America would always come out on top. He saw international trade as a zero-sum game, where compromise was weakness and hardball was the only way to play. This led to trade wars with everyone from China to the European Union, and in 2025, with America's closest neighbor, Canada. Suddenly, allies became adversaries, and the world watched as old partnerships were put to the test. The US-Canada relationship is one of the world's most successful partnerships, with billions in goods crossing the border daily. For decades, this border has been a symbol of cooperation, trust, and mutual prosperity. Generations of leaders on both sides have worked to build a system where businesses and families could depend on open trade and shared opportunity. But Trump saw existing trade deals as unfair and set out to rewrite the rules, risking decades of cooperation. He believed America was getting the short end of the stick, and he was ready to flip the script, no matter the cost. The heart of the conflict? The North American auto industry, where companies like Ford, GM, and Chrysler rely on a tightly integrated cross-border supply chain. These factories don't just build cars, they build connections between two nations. A single car part might cross the border several times before ending up in a finished vehicle. It's a delicate dance of logistics, timing, and trust that keeps the wheels of industry turning. When a president throws a massive tariff into that system, the consequences are enormous. Suddenly, costs skyrocket, supply chains stall, and uncertainty ripples through every level of the economy. This isn't just politics. It's about real jobs, real companies, and millions of livelihoods. From factory workers to small business owners, the impact is personal and immediate. Understanding Trump's trade moves means understanding the ripple effects on all of us, how a single decision at the top can change the course of industries, communities, and even the future of international cooperation. The trade war didn't start with cars, it started with metal. Trump doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%, citing retaliation. Ontario hit back, slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. It was classic tit-for-tat, tariffs for tariffs, pain for pain. Both sides dug in, and the economic damage mounted. Business leaders on both sides watched in alarm as costs soared and supply chains frayed. The once smooth flow of goods and energy became unpredictable. For Trump, this was just tough negotiation, short-term pain for what he saw as long-term gain. He ignored warnings from economists and CEOs, doubling down on tariffs to pressure Canada. The message: no industry was safe, and he'd go further than anyone expected. The result? A vicious cycle of escalation, with real costs for businesses and workers. The US-Canada economic relationship was suddenly on the rocks, and the auto industry was next in the crosshairs. Then, in a move that stunned both politicians and business leaders, Trump raised the stakes, threatening to permanently shut down Canada's auto industry if Ontario didn't drop its electricity surcharge. The message was loud and clear: comply or face economic disaster. For many, it was a shocking escalation in an already tense trade dispute, and it sent shockwaves through boardrooms and factory floors across North America. This was no bluff. The auto sector is Ontario's backbone, employing hundreds of thousands and supporting entire communities. From Windsor to Oshawa, families depend on these jobs, and the ripple effects reach far beyond the assembly line, touching suppliers, local businesses, and even schools. Shutting it down would devastate Canada's economy, and hit the US too, since the industries are deeply intertwined. Every car built in Ontario contains parts that cross the border multiple times, and a shutdown would mean chaos for both countries' supply chains. Trump's threat was a nuclear option, risking the entire North American auto ecosystem over a trade spat. The stakes were enormous, with billions of dollars and countless livelihoods hanging in the balance. The response was immediate. Ontario suspended its surcharge, forced into retreat to protect its economy. The government knew it couldn't gamble with so many jobs on the line, and the pressure was simply too great to resist. Trump claimed victory, touting his hardball tactics as proof of his negotiating prowess. For his supporters, it was a win for American jobs and a demonstration of strength on the world stage. But for automakers, it was a terrifying reminder. Decades of planning, investment, and cross-border cooperation could be undone by a single political threat. The uncertainty sent shockwaves through the industry, leaving executives scrambling to assess the risks. The cross-border supply chain's fragility was exposed. Suddenly, the seamless flow of parts and vehicles that had defined North American manufacturing looked vulnerable, and companies began to question how secure their operations really were. Ford, GM, and others saw how vulnerable they were to political whims. Years of efficiency and integration could be wiped out by a single tweet or press conference. The message was clear: no matter how efficient your business, politics could upend everything overnight. It was a wake-up call for the entire sector, forcing companies to rethink their strategies and contingency plans. The threat forced Canada's hand, but it also rattled the entire industry. Workers, executives, and policymakers alike were left wondering what might come next and how to protect themselves from future shocks. The cost of brinkmanship was now painfully clear. Lost productivity, shaken investor confidence, and the specter of layoffs loomed over the sector, with no easy solutions in sight. The trade war had become an existential crisis for North American manufacturing. What started as a dispute over policy had escalated into a threat to the very foundation of the continent's industrial base, and the fallout was just beginning. As uncertainty lingered, the industry braced for more turbulence, knowing that the next shock could be just around the corner. For Ford, the US-Canada border is more than just a line on a map. It's the lifeblood of their entire operation, an assembly line that stretches for hundreds of miles, connecting factories, workers, and communities on both sides. Every day, thousands of trucks cross this border, carrying vital auto parts and finished vehicles, weaving together a complex web of manufacturing that keeps the wheels of the industry turning. Their just-in-time supply chain depends on seamless cross-border movement of parts and vehicles. Even the smallest delay can ripple through the system, causing costly slowdowns and production headaches. For Ford and its suppliers, efficiency is everything. Timing is measured in minutes, not days. An engine built in Michigan, installed in Ontario, then sold in the US. This is normal. In fact, a single vehicle might cross the border 6 or 7 times before it ever reaches a dealership. This intricate choreography is what makes North American auto manufacturing so competitive. But when President Trump threatened Canada's auto sector, this delicate system was thrown into chaos. Suddenly, the future of thousands of jobs and billions in trade was uncertain. If Ontario plants closed, US assembly lines would grind to a halt within days. The entire North American auto industry would feel the shockwaves, from Detroit to Toronto and beyond. The entire operation relies on a stable, open border. Any disruption, no matter how brief, can bring production to a standstill, costing millions. Plant managers suddenly faced paralyzing uncertainty. How do you plan when the border could close at any moment? Every decision became a gamble, with livelihoods hanging in the balance. Billions in production and sales were at risk, along with tens of thousands of jobs. Communities that depended on the auto industry braced for the worst, fearing layoffs and shuttered factories. The tariffs meant to protect American industry now threatened to cripple it. Instead of shielding workers, these policies put their futures in jeopardy. Ford and others were caught in a political crossfire, powerless to control their fate. Executives scrambled for solutions, but the uncertainty was overwhelming. The lesson is clear: in a global economy, hurting your neighbor can mean hurting yourself. The fates of workers, companies, and entire communities are intertwined. Trade policy had become a weapon, and companies like Ford were the hostages, left waiting for politicians to decide their future. The business community's reaction? Panic. The Business Roundtable and top CEOs warned the White House. This trade war would hurt American companies and consumers. After Trump's threats, over 100 CEOs met with him, desperate to explain the real-world consequences. Tariffs are taxes, they argued, making US companies less competitive. The bourbon industry was already suffering, with Canadian stores pulling American whiskey. The stock market plunged nearly 900 points, the worst day of the year. Investors saw warning signs everywhere. The uncertainty made long-term planning impossible, driving a wedge between business and political leaders. Small business optimism tanked, and economic anxiety soared. The message from business: this trade war was hurting, not helping the American economy. As the trade war raged, Washington faced another crisis: a looming government shutdown. On the same day Trump threatened Canada's auto industry, Congress narrowly passed a stopgap funding bill. Trump pushed hard for the bill, even targeting Republicans who opposed it. Vice President J.D. Vance pitched it as essential for shrinking government and advancing their agenda. The funding fight and the trade war were linked. Both showed the administration's comfort with chaos and brinkmanship. For businesses and Canada, this was a warning. The White House was willing to risk everything for its goals. The chaos wasn't a side effect, it was the strategy. And it made Trump's threats all the more credible. The real victims of the trade war? Ordinary workers. American and Canadian auto workers share the same fate. If one side suffers, both do. A shutdown in Canada would mean mass layoffs on both sides of the border. Entire communities would be devastated, families plunged into crisis. Workers had no control over the political battles threatening their jobs. The tariffs meant to help them put their livelihoods at risk. Other industries, farmers, distillers, suppliers, were collateral damage. The trade war wasn't a targeted strike, it was economic carpet bombing, and workers paid the highest price. Ontario backed down on electricity, but Canada's defiance remained. Premier Doug Ford urged Trump to focus on China, not attack Canada. Trump's rhetoric escalated, suggesting Canada should become the 51st U.S. state. His press secretary echoed the idea, unsettling Canadians. The dispute became about more than trade. It was about sovereignty and identity. Canadians united in resistance, determined not to be bullied or absorbed. The crisis strengthened Canadian resolve and national unity. For Canada, this was about partnership, not submission. The 2025 trade standoff left a lasting scar on US-Canada relations. The crisis exposed the fragility of North America's integrated economy. Trust built over generations was shaken. Auto workers now face an uncertain future, their jobs hostage to political whims. Automakers may be forced to build less efficient, more expensive supply chains. The era of seamless trade may be over. Canada will likely diversify its trade, wary of US unpredictability. The rules-based partnership has been replaced by threats and tariffs. The Ford-Trump-Canada saga is a cautionary tale in a global economy. There are no easy wins. Behind every political headline are real people whose futures hang in the balance.